So hello and thank you for joining Chartered Accountants Ireland and our Governance Webcast series. I'm Níall Fitzgerald, Head of Ethics and Governance in Chartered Accountants Ireland, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dermot Crowley, Deputy CEO of Dalata Hotel Group Plc, who many of you may know for their hotel brands, the Maldron, Clayton, throughout Ireland and the UK, and they manage a portfolio of other partner hotels as well. Dermot is a chartered accountant. He worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Procter & Gamble, Forte Hotels, and Renault before joining the Jury's Hotel Group Plc in 2000 as Head of Development. He spent 6 years with Ion Equity before joining Dalata in 2012. And Dermot, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to launch straight in, Dermot, with the first question. I'm going to ask, what is your experience so far and your observations on the response to the crisis, this COVID-19 crisis, by businesses and regulators in the community?
Hi, Níall. I think first of all, people were in a bit of a denial, right? Okay, and I suppose because we were in the hospitality industry and we could see this was going to be a significant danger for us early on. I was quite surprised, even when I was meeting people, socially, that people weren't as concerned about this as, I potentially was in the hospitality industry. So I think people initially said, this isn't going to be so bad. It can't be that bad. There's only 80,000 cases in China. And I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it is now either. But I think in the hospitality industry, when we started looking at the end of February, occupancies in Milan down at 10%, looked at what had happened in China and places like Hong Kong, we knew it was very serious for us very early on. So we had to react really, really quickly because we knew our business was going to be one of the first to be impacted on. I think then really from mid-March onwards, right, when everyone started seeing just how serious it was and the lockdown started coming in, businesses have been really, really good at reacting. I'm really struck by looking at what the supermarkets have done, in terms of the way they're getting people queuing, the way the whole supply chain has actually held up really, really well in terms of food, and that's been really, really impressive on their part.
Dermot, recently we produced a webinar and we also produced an article and where we sought the advice from various different CEOs and board members, kind of collating their insights and asking them for, they provided advice to others in terms of how they might deal with this crisis, plan for post-recovery. What advice would you have in all your experience as Deputy CEO and Heads of Development and Finance roles? What advice would you have to board members and CEOs out there?
I think there's two things really. I think first of all is communication, right, which I'll go through. And the second thing is, as quickly as you can get your mind around it, have a plan, right, okay? And that plan needs to extend over a long period of time. And don't be afraid to create a plan that you might look back at in 6 weeks' time and say, God, that was a bit naive because this has moved on, right? So it has to be flexible. But if I touch on communication first, because this is a real key one, I think the temptation can be, I'm too busy for a board meeting, okay? But I think the level of communication between the execs and non-execs is really important. So the execs need to understand that as a non-exec director, when you're not dealing in the day-to-day of the business, you are going to have concerns, right? Because you've got a lot of responsibilities as a director, but yet you're not seeing everything that's happening every minute of the day, whereas the execs are. So I think it's really important for the exec directors to be really conscious of the concerns a non-exec director might have and be really open to that, right? And then likewise, the non-exec directors need to understand that the exec directors are probably under significant amount of pressure, having to make some really serious decisions that aren't easy. But you've got to have the space to do that as well, okay? And I think the best way of people understanding the other perspective is communication. So we would have had an additional board meeting in March over Zoom to set out what we were doing, what we, as executives, what we'd done, what our plans were, to give them a really clear view as to where we thought our cash flow projections were, because obviously as a non-exec director, that's probably one of your number one concerns, that we were dealing with people fairly, that we were communicating properly with suppliers and customers. And then we had our scheduled meeting in April, and we'll have another meeting in an additional update at some point next week. So that communication is really, really important. And then Pat, our CEO, sends out an end of week email, short email as to what's happened during the week, and I might send an update on something that's happened, particularly with investor relations and the finance side of the business as well. So I think communication is really important. The second thing then is having that plan. So as I see it, the way I've looked at this is that there's 4 phases to this. The first phase is your initial reaction, and we've more or less finished that phase at this stage. So for us, that's closing down hotels, it's taking care of people, it's being fair to your customers, being fair to your employees, being fair to your suppliers. It's getting your hands around the business really, really quickly, and it's protecting your cash. It's dealing. We got an agreement with our banks over 3 weeks ago, and making sure that relationship's strong. Communicating with your investors, because obviously that's really important to us. Our share price dropped dramatically, so you've got to give them some reassurance and issue some announcements to the stock exchange. I think the second phase then really is time for where you've got to plan for the reopening of for, in our case, the hotels. So what does that reopening period look like? Everyone's trying to wonder what happens in the start of May. Our expectations is that really we're going to be into mid-June, we reckon, before you can really start seeing any hotels reopen as such. And I wouldn't even call it a normality, but we don't know the length of that phase, but we'll use that phase as well for some people who've got a bit more time in their hands, that they're working on projects, okay, that they didn't get to previously. And then the third phase is actually when the hotels reopen, right? And our view is that for us, in our industry, we're looking at a period of lower occupancies, right? Because it's going to take much longer for international travel to occur. So we're trying to plan for a situation where where it's primarily a domestic market. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for our business model? So planning that in terms of how we operate the hotels is happening during phase 2, and then that's all during phase 3 is that lower, and it's a gradual recovery, and it all depends on things outside of our control, like the appearance of a vaccine, the management of the virus itself. And then the final phase is actually the new normal, okay, and trying to already work out, we'll start in the next few weeks working on what does that look like. And we don't know when that's going to start. It's likely to be sometime in maybe 12 months from now. It could be quite a bit sooner, it could be a bit later, but trying to understand what it means for our own specific industry, people's attitude to travel, people's attitude to sustainability. The disruptors in our business like Airbnb, the OTAs, are they going to change so much? What's the customer's expectation in the hotels? Is there a requirement for increased cleanliness? So it's trying to understand what that new world looks like for us, so at least we can start planning for it.
Dermot, it sounds like you're certainly well on the way to planning your recovery strategy, and even well into thinking about what things are going to look like post-recovery. What I'm hearing there is communication is key, but what I'm also hearing a lot there is the word uncertainty, and planning in uncertainty is quite difficult and quite challenging. But if you get the communication piece right, you're getting advice from your board and hearing what's going on from others, but you'll also be letting them know what you're doing. So everybody has a very good understanding of what's happening. And the other thing you said at the start was not being afraid to revisit your plan as things become more certain and you get to know more.
No, absolutely. So we already produce a weekly cash flow, which we share with the board as well, right? Okay. So and that gets refined every week as we get more information, right? And that'll become more and more accurate over time for the next 3 to 4 months, right? But when you're trying to, create a plan for, let's say, 2021 and 2022, which we have to do, okay, we might look back in 12 months' time and say, God, that was very naive, right? But the reality is that if you create a base, because all base plans that we would have had 4 or 5 months ago are gone now effectively. So we need to reestablish what is the base, right? What does the company start looking like? What's its revenues look likely to be? And that's a big amount of work. But if you don't, I can't stress enough, uncertainty doesn't give you an excuse not to plan. And the reality is Dalata were created out of the last crisis, really. We started buying a lot of hotels, distressed hotels, at less than replacement cost. So crisis creates opportunities for you as well, okay? And that's in every industry, right? And that's something we're already starting to look and focus as well. Do research in background, because you need to get away from the negativity of the crisis and seeing the opportunity that it creates for your business as well.
Dermot, you've given some fantastic insights there. Dermot Crowley, Deputy CEO of Dalata Group plc. Thank you very much for joining us and keep safe.